Hello, dear viewers. Support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it. And also, make sure you comment your thought. Now let's start the video. Kneeling, her plate armor clinking on the stone floor of the audience hall, Brienne lowered her head in front of the three Starks. I offer my services to you, Jon of House Stark, Sansa of House Stark, and Rickon of House Stark. I will shield your back, keep your counsel, and give my life to you if you need it of me. I, Brienne of House Stark, swear myself to House Stark by the old gods and the new, until the end of my days, or until you release me from this pledge. Sharing a glance with Sansa, who seemed placid, and a very excited Rickon, Jon drew Longclaw from its scabbard. He stepped down from the dais, gently resting the tip of the cold steel upon Brienne's shoulder plate. He did not have the power to knight her, but the gesture still possessed a symbolic power. And I, Lord Jon of House Stark, on behalf of my honor and the honor of my sister and brother, do vow this moment that you shall always have a place by my hearth and meat and mead at my table. And I pledge to ask no service of you that may bring you dishonor. Arise, Lady Brienne. The last promise, it was something that Brienne knew was rare in the world. Even Rensley, the kindest man she had yet known, could be arrogant and prideful, demanding the worst from his sworn swords. Jon Stark, any of the Starks, she could trust them to keep true to their promises. Slowly she rose. I will journey to the ends of the earth with you, Lord Stark. Or either of you, Lord and Lady Stark. We appreciate such, Lady Brienne, Sansa said warmly. If only she had joined her at the Crossroads Inn long ago. But that was the past, this was the future. Protect him for me, with my life. Bowing, Brienne turned and left the chamber, purpose surging within her. Now it was just the three remaining Starks, all that was left of their house. Perhaps she should stay here, with you, Jon stated first. Protect you from whatever comes out. I think the Spearwives will be enough. Sansa chuckled. She had seen the wilding female warriors train, and they impressed her far more than even Joffrey's Kingsguard. Men like Marentrant and Island Payne would get slaughtered by them. That and our household guard will be fine. I'd much rather have Brienne protecting you on the battlefield. You already have Howland Reed, the great Lady Knight, and Podrick should round it out. Podrick can use the experience, Jon smirked, crossing his arms as he leaned back in the chair. So, what's next? He wondered how his father could stand the boredom of the rote duties of a lord. Sansa glanced at Jon, eyes gesturing to Rickon. We're bringing Theon for his mercy hearing. Silence settled over the audience hall, Jon wincing and joining his sister in worrying for their little brother. Rickon had seen his first atrocities when Theon took over Winterfell during the War of the Five Kings, and the elder Starks felt that him seeing Theon again could cause the boy to relapse to how sullen and fearful he had been upon arriving back in Winterfell. It was Jon that figured out how to breach the subject. Rickon, perhaps Small Jon or Tormund are up to help you work on your swordsmanship. The two burly warriors hated each other, supposedly hated each other, always sparring, made quite a sight for the Stormlanders and other Northerners. Yeah, Rickon nodded, eager not to be in the same room as Theon. See you at dinner, Jon. He wrapped his arms around his older brother. Sansa. He kissed his sister's cheek before darting out of the side door, new sword clinking on his hip, a gift from the king for the boy on his 12th named day the month before. Jon cleared his throat. Bring in Theon Greyjoy. The bannerman flung open the doors, and walking the Ironborn that started the whole mess. He was cleaner, dressed in northern letters and having his hair and beard cropped neatly. A bath left him without the grime Ramsay loved to parade him in. The Ironborn prince, no longer spelling of dog shit, but in his eyes he still remained a fight between the Theon loyal to House Stark and Reek, the cockless plaything of the Bolton bastard. It wasn't long after the doors closed, the Stark bannermen knowing their lord could take care of himself, that his eyes met Jon's. The two stared at each other, room growing as cold as the wolf's wood despite the fire crackling in the hearth. Jon's eyes glared icy daggers at Theon, while the former ward of Winterfell kept his eyes on the ground, not willing to meet Jon's gaze, barely able to meet Sansa's gaze, normally a sign of deception, but such wasn't what Jon could see. Shame. Well-deserved shame. A complete contrast with the brash and cocky cunt Jon had known from his former life. Well, the voice of the Lord of Winterfell broke the silence. Do you have anything to say for yourself, Theon? Hearing his proper name said with all the warmth of the wall from the man Theon had so abused and insulted during their childhood made Theon wince. He looked up, pain in his eyes. He looked to Sansa, her expression flat but with a sort of familiarity, a flicker of compassion, of a familial bond that his own father shared not with him. I am not proud of what I did. I betrayed my family. Robb, he trusted me, and I failed him. You did, Sansa stated. You betrayed my other brothers as well, Theon. Remorse was written over his face. One Jon could tell was genuine. And he did not kill Bran and Rickon. Such was obvious, though Theon seemed to be just stating it. Not an attempt to weasel out of his punishment. Those bodies weren't that. They were somebody's children, Jon replied, eyes narrowing. A mother and father deprived of their beloved children out of a fucking dick-measuring contest between you and your men who ended up betraying you anyway. The former heir to the Iron Islands turned away again. What could one say to that? While the truth, it cut deeply. Jon leaned forward, hands clasped together. I should kill you myself for that, but it appears Ramsay Snow gave you a far worse punishment than death by my sword would do. Ramsay. Theon flinched, shaking at the mere mention of the name. Though the sadistic monster was dead, though Theon had killed him personally, he still haunted him, haunted his very soul. Theon, he looked up once more to see Sansa. Eyes softened. Ramsay is dead. He's gone. Even Jon had calmed, edge in his voice slightly lessened, a tiny glimpse of apology on his expression. He may have inherited Ned Stark's tendency to coldness, but the Bolton cruelty was alien to him. Jon was not a sadist. Sighing, the Lord of Winterfell leaned back once more. You still betrayed Robb, Theon, but you saved Sansa. The brutalization she received, Ramsay could have killed her, but you stopped him from leading their armies in the field. If weren't for your past actions, I would have recommended to King Stannis to support you in claiming the Salt Throne from your father. But you won't. It wasn't even a question. My debt to you for that morning does not absolve you from your crimes, Theon, for your betrayal. Sansa was no longer the girl of before, adept at giggling about knights and dresses. She had hardened, grown into a cunning woman. They had all grown from their childhood, but the past is the past, and we must judge for the future. Standing from his seat, Jon rounded the Lord's table and proceeded down the raised steps. He was never a large man, but he seemed to tower over Theon. You are still family, Theon. What you did for Sansa, a fist clenched but then released, proves you are still a Stark, a Greyjoy, and a Stark. Eddard was far more a father to you. That shit, Balon Greyjoy, Sansa added. Theon could not disagree, only fighting with his learned instincts not to cower in the face of the two Starks. What do you want us to do with you, Theon? As our family, we extend you that choice. If it is equitable, we will grant it. Jaw-dropping ever so slightly, Theon composed himself. You just let me go? If you wish to go, Jain relaxed his expression. If you wish to stay, we will accommodate you. But if you wish to go, I won't stop you. At first, Theon wanted to say nothing, feeling like Ramsay had taken it all from him. Physically, he's just tired. Even though Ramsay was dead and gone, he could hear his voice in his head. Often he'd be talked down to, making him feel less than. Eventually, the bombardment of hate set in and he truly became Reek. Even hearing his true name, Theon, sounded weird to his ear. It'd take time for him to shed the thick layer of skin. This persona he became, Reek. It was hard for him to tell what he wanted, though part of him still yearned for Pike, his ancestral home. Despite only knowing pain there, he needed to return. Home, he gulped, shivering. Let me go back to the Iron Islands, find my sister Yara, set things right between our people. Jon cast a look at his sister, eyebrow raising. Sansa shrugged, everything in her body language conveying that there was no reason for Theon to be duplicitous, to be cunning. Ramsay had beaten and mutilated him out of it, leaving the poor husk of a person reminded in the most brutal of ways where he had found true loyalty and family. At most, all the Iron Islands offered him was his sister. All else in his heart rested in Winterfell. The Iron Islands are weak. Their forces have been defeated wherever they attacked. Sansa dropped to her hard tone, learned over the years from such luminaries as Cersei Lannister, Littlefinger, and Rose Bolton. The iron price is nothing but reaving and raping, which makes you good sailors but horrible soldiers. Any attack upon us on land will be destroyed. You realize that, Theon? Aye, I do. He fought the urge to retreat into being Reek. To just cower in front of his brother and sister in all but name, begging for mercy and demanding he be given orders to carry out, to be something worse than a mere dog. Ramsay is dead. You are Theon. Ramsay is dead. Sansa had never called him by Ramsay's pet name. If she could believe in him, then perhaps he could rebuild his own belief in himself as well. I don't want the Iron Islands to fight. It's only brought us death and ruin. I think my sister would agree. They'll need to come under the fold eventually, Jon shrugged. When Stannis takes the throne, Theon, I'd hope you could be a factor in securing them. Balin won't bend the knee, Sansa said. No, but his sister might, Jon replied, pointing at Theon. We're not good fighters, Theon sighed. You don't have to fight, Jon smirked, opening his arms. Just stand in the way. Sansa leaned forward. Jon, what are you saying? The Greyjoys have a lot of ships, Sansa, Jon explained, looking at her. They can be used to blockade King's Landing when Stannis nears. Sansa nodded. Oh yes, that could work. Not allow them to get any supplies from the sea. The city would fall in a few days, Jon added, crossing his arms. By then our forces will be vast enough to force a surrender after the siege. Sansa gasped. Could be largely bloodless. Nodding, Jon grabbed Theon by the scruff of his collar. If I let you go, can you secure your family for Stannis? I don't know, Theon replied. I don't know if they'll listen to me. They better, Jon scowled, because you're going. I am? He is? Sansa frowned, putting a hand on Jon's shoulder. Shouldn't you speak with Stannis first? Perhaps, Jon shrugged. But I know what he'll say already. He needs this. Then he narrowed his gaze in Theon's direction. You will depart within the fortnight. If you betray us again, I will do to you what you did to those boys. Clear? Despite his honor, there was no question Jon meant what he said. Clear, brother. Several minutes later, as the bannermen closed the doors to the audience hall, Jon pinched the bridge of his nose, leaning against the wall. Do you trust him? He asked Sansa, who was calmly reading quartermaster reports on their supplies. His sister was growing into a consummate leader of their house, the perfect person to entrust Winterfell with while he left, the perfect person for Rickon to learn from in case something happened to Jon. Do you? Sansa sent the question right back to him. Honestly, he didn't know how a simple two-word question could fluster him so much. If it were Theon of the past, I wouldn't. Robin, Jon didn't wish to speak ill of Robb, but to properly avenge him, then one had to learn from his mistakes. Robb should have kept him as far away from the Iron Islands as possible. I agree, brother, but he is not the same, Theon. Her conviction was absolute. You changed in Castle Black. I changed on my journeys. He changed in his torture. The Theon now would never betray us. Walking over to Jon, she pulled him into a sisterly hug, so much like the ones he would share with Arya, that a sense of sadness passed over him. How much he missed his youngest sister. I know he didn't show you love, but neither did I, but you forgave me. Jon returned the hug, grateful to finally have the love of Sansa. I can't forget what he has done, Sansa. I don't forget what he did, but I can forgive him. She pulled back. We have enemies all around us, Jon. The lone wolf dies, but the pack survives. The Dian, whether our blood or not, is part of our pack. We have to keep our heads together, or else Cersei will separate them from our bodies. Blinking, Jon started to grin. You sound like father. The grin morphed into a chuckle. Sansa's lips curled upward, soon laughing merrily with Jon. We used to make fun of his odd quips, and now I'm saying them. The seriousness of the day, 7 hells. The seriousness of their entire lives since leaving Winterfell so long ago, poured out as Jon and Sansa shared a torrent of childlike laughter not heard in the halls of Winterfell since that fateful day. Bran fell from the tower. A whoosh of air nearly extinguished the torch in her hand, Daenerys rocking back on her heels as the 2 second sons Sellswords yanked open the door. Normally the Unsullied would do it, but this decision was done on a whim, and the person in her bed at the time had graciously offered to escort her. Are you sure about this, my queen? Asked Daenerys, his normally arrogant grin replaced with a quirky worry. You locked them up for a reason. I did, didn't I? Daenerys thought, melancholy invading her emotions. Not that she'd show it off. You have heard the rumors that flicker in from across Slaver's Bay. She hated that name, vowing to change it, as soon as she could. From Volantis to New Guise of Drogon, attacking livestock, stealing catches of fish from fishing boats. But no human deaths, no one burned or eaten, not since. Tears threatened to form at the thought of that little girl, her bones blackened as the poor father laid them before her. My child, dead upon this earth, I would never wish it upon anyone. To know that Drogon had killed a child, that her dragons could kill any child, it had forced her to lock up Rhaegal and Viserion deep within the Great Pyramid of Meereen. Daenerys had never regretted that decision. Not until the dreams were returning in force. Slackened for a while, her sleep undisturbed, but back to Invader's slumbering form for an entire week now. The familiar White Wolf was at the center of everything. Daenerys unable to parse the meaning. Why a wolf? Why is it white? Why the snow? She had never seen snow. Not since a sprinkling of it once in Braavos. But never snows that carpeted the ground in wide drifts that came to one's waist. But there it was. Over and over again. It irritated the Dragon Queen to no end. This dream was different than the others, though. Caught amongst the shadows. Dark forces attacking her. In some, Daenerys recognized harpies howling like wraiths as they charged, swiping at her with their knives. But others, all Daenerys could make out from the formless monsters, were glowing blue eyes, cold and of the purest malevolence she had ever seen. In the distance, the wolf had returned. Only now it fought with a ferocity she had not yet seen in her dreams. Daenerys had tried to run to the wolf, but the shadows blocked her, blocked both. And in the distance her dragons had roared, cries loud and mournful, their chains leaving them unable to save their mother. Daenerys knew prophecies. She had come across many mystics and sorcerers in her life, some benign, some helpful, and some not. One thing that all had in common, they were never direct. Always riddles, always shadows and masks covering both their own true intentions and the true meaning of what they predicted. As such, the Queen of Meereen knew the dream meant more than the explicit threat it seemed to warn her about. But that didn't mean she wasn't going to take the chance of leaving the warning unheeded. Are you sure about this? Dorear reached out and placed his hand on her waist. An intimate gesture, one shared only by the closest of lovers. Your hold on the people themselves is tenuous as it is. Tales of dragons, burning, more children won't help matters. Stilling at the feel of his hand on her, Daenerys turned her head. I know that, she calmly removed the hand from her waist, hiding her amusement as his face fell for a split second before morphing into his normal cocky facade. Daenerys trusted Daenerys, respected him as a loyal follower and a gifted lover, but she was not willing to bare her soul to him, to let him close to her heart. He was companionship for lonely nights in her chambers, nothing more. I am confident the dragons will be a symbol of pride and safety for my people, one of terror and fear only to my enemies. At the absolute conviction in his voice, Dario nodded. As my queen desires, he stepped back, allowing Daenerys to continue into the depths of the cellar. The only light clearing away the darkness, other than the lanterns in the hallway above, was the torch she carried. Daenerys descended down the stone steps with caution, gingerly feeling her way forward with one foot at a time. Slowly but surely, in the void before her, two large columns came to view. Reimagined, she called out, seeing nothing in the chamber itself. Viserion? Sadness flooded her chest, thinking of the darkness her beloved children were forced to live in. A dragon is no slave, yet she made them slaves in all but name. Come out, my darlings. Her voice caught from the guilt. The last time she had journeyed down her alone, the dragons had been furious, nearly bathing her in dragon fire and screeching at each other like crazed monsters. But dragons were perceptive, emotional creatures, catching the pain in their mother's voice. The two great beasts slowly ambled out of the darkness. Dany gasped, tearing up in pride at her children. At how much they had grown. Rhaegal was the second largest of the three brothers. Head almost the size of Daenerys below the neck. Viserion, not close behind. They watched her with searching, curious eyes, a look she hadn't seen since putting them down here. Setting the torch in a holder, she approached them. My darling. Slowly, gingerly, Dany rested her hand upon Reimagined's snout, heart clenching when the dragon flinched. No, my sweetling, it's all right. She hadn't talked to them like this since even before the capture of Meereen, her children growing and growing until most saw them as monsters, just like they see me, as my father's daughter. But they weren't monsters, and as Rogiel let his mother lightly stroke his scales, Daenerys hoped she wasn't either. "Let me tell you something, my children." Her hand brushed down his jaw and neck, Rogiel letting out a purr. "I have to marry a man tomorrow. A rich, well-respected noble here in Meereen. One I do not love, but rather for a political alliance." Daenerys chuckled as she grasped the bronzed metal collar, a stronger version of the slave collars even her greatest friend had once worn. Tears clouded her eyes, but she continued, "Bearing her soul to her dragons, the only ones who could truly understand, the three of them, and Drogon, alone in the world. I never experienced that kind of love before." Her hand enclosed around the pin that held the collar in place. "My first husband. I grew to love the safety he represented, but he was a rapist. I never loved him." The pin slid out, dainty, letting it clatter on the floor before moving towards Viserion. "There is another, a sellsword. He is quite comely, I do admit." She blushed like a maiden, rather than the queen she was. "I enjoy his company, but I don't see a future with him. I am a queen." Viserion hooted as Dany freed him. "When I take back my birthright," there was no doubt in her voice of that fact. With all the doubts swirling through her mind, the certainty of her cause never faltered. "I will need to marry. It is the simplest way to secure an alliance, and I will need powerful houses on my side to take Westeros." Finally free, the dragons shifted, looking at her, heads bent, lightly jostling each other for the comfort of nuzzling their mother. Smiling sadly, Dany lovingly stroked the snouts of her children. "Such marriages aren't usually for love," the dragons purred, enjoying her touch. "Do you think I could be lucky? Finally find love with some lord in a far-off land?" Amber eyes boring in on her, Reichel cocked his head. He let out a chirp. Dany laughed. "Oh, my child." A scratch of his lower jaw drew out another purr. "I wish I was as optimistic as you." In response to her taking the life of a man not required by the faceless men, her sight was taken from her. Complete darkness was all there was. They dropped her off on a cobbled street corner. She just laid there. Often kind people would toss coins at her, thinking her a beggar. Her appearance appeared as such, at least. Smelly, saggy rags covered her back. Her spot was that of high traffic. Constantly people passed by her. The footfalls felt on her cheek as laid. She had no visitors, except for the waif. She'd come every day to train with Arya. Really, it was more a beating. Since Arya had lost her sight, any true fighting skills went with it. She devolved into swinging wildly with no sense of direction. The waif struck her down with ease, taunting her all the while. "You should have died," she'd say, "for what you did." After another beating, she laid on her back, breathing hard. Her whole body ached, lip busted, forehead bleeding, too weak to move. Hunger became an issue quickly, and no food came to her. She went as far as she could until it got to be too much to bear, gathering what money she had given to her in a small sack and tried to find some food. Luckily, the smell floated across her nose and she followed it. Most folks got out of her way. She felt them pass by her, moving slowly, with her hands out, trying to find anything to guide her. Oftentimes she'd just slide up against any walls near her. Luckily, the market was close. The noise of rampant voices flooded her eardrums. She walked until the smell brought her running into a person. Someone yelled at her, "Hey, watch where—" "Oh!" Arya recoiled backward, hiding her face, nearly dropping her money. The person's voice softened then. Arya noticed it to be a female. "Oh, I'm sorry." The woman's hand reached out to softly touch Arya on the shoulder. "Do you need help?" Rhaenyra shook her head and backed up further. Then turning tail and taking off in a sprint, she didn't make it 5 steps before crashing into someone else. She flew off her feet and fell hard against the street. The tiny purse she clutched to herself had been loosened out of her grip. The pouch collided with the cobble and burst open. What money she had gathered scattered all over. The voice of the person she hit bellowed, but she didn't hear a word over the ringing of her eyes, probably accounting to the collision of her skull against the ground. Those that had gathered around scrambled to steal her coins. When she sat up, a hand laid on her shoulder. The person crowded her, shielding her from the noise. The Good Samaritan's hair brushed against her cheek, and they smelled sweet. Arya assumed if her ears worked, she'd hear the soothing tones of their voice. The woman she'd run into earlier comforted her now. The sort of comfort she hadn't received since her childhood, and even then she had forced it away. Now she happily welcomed it. Her time in Braavos wasn't all that she expected. It'd been much worse. It had been some time since she ran around the Winterfell courtyard. She hadn't missed that until a couple days ago. Then they left her, standing up. Arya missed them immediately. Thankfully, her ears began to reassume their duties. The sweet-smelling woman was sorting out the row she had started. "She's blind," her comforter said, pointing at Arya. "Don't you see?" There was some more deliberation, then it all quieted down. The woman returned to Arya's side, whispering, "Come on, come with me." This time Arya didn't argue. Triumphantly, Jon climbed the ramparts, standing on the wall, overlooking the massive army before his eyes, ready to move out. The soldiers stretched over the horizon farther than he could see, having departed just hours ago, while he and the king lingered in Winterfell for a bit longer to take care of a few more things. They would soon ride up to the front, where Davos and royal family waited. Jon pulled his new cloak tighter around his form, feeling the wind pick up. Sansa had sewn him a new one a few days ago, one that looked very similar to their father's. He felt proud to wear it over his shoulders, though the new symbol of it weighed heavily on his back. A direwolf, a fitting sigil for Jon Stark. The name meant much to him, being able to finally bear it as he always wanted. The cloak felt like the name cementing into his tombstone now, as if he finally earned it, deserved it. In truth, he was the future of his house. It helped to ease his burden, knowing he had Rickon back with them, but he was just a boy. Jon had the reins of House Stark, all on his shoulders. "I will not fail you, father. Will not fail you, Robb." But just as he got control, he had to leave, because he swore himself to Stannis, and the king needed him. So he'd do what was required of him. Besides, it felt like the right thing to do. His family will never be safe, while a false Baratheon sits on the throne. One controlled by the Lannisters, the last real Baratheon, deserved it. The man in question came up behind to stand next to Jon, having grown a weathered salt and pepper beard to go with his skeptical expression. "What are you doing up here? Brooding again?" "Not so much this time, your grace," Jon smirked, looking out over the army again. "I don't have much to brood over right now." "I see," Stannis replied. "What about your family? You're leaving them." "They'll be fine," Jon said, waving his hand dismissively. "They're home. No one in the north will stand up to them, and I'm leaving plenty of men here to protect them. There must always be a Stark in Winterfell, so Sansa will take care of things, while Rickon learns to be a lord just in case." "What about those monsters beyond the wall, Stark?" Jon's expression darkened, having actually forgotten about the icy threat looming over them. He frowned. "I hope the wall can hold them back until we're all united." "It has for thousands of years," Stannis answered. "No reason to believe it won't now." "I hope you're right." Stannis went silent for a few moments then, staring at Jon. "What is this? I hear about Theon Greyjoy going back to Iron Islands." Jon didn't flinch. "Yes, your grace. I thought it'd be prudent to send the last living son of Balon Greyjoy home, in hopes he could convince his family to turn to the true king. Unlike last time, hopefully he won't betray them." "Balon Greyjoy," Stannis scowling, spitting the words out. "Another false king." "My king, forgive me if I am out of line, but I know that the Greyjoy fleet would be an added benefit to our army." "How so?" Stannis tested him, knowing the true answer before he asked. "A blockade, your grace," Jon replied, swallowing, trying to hold Stannis' hard gaze. "Have the Greyjoys congest the port, forbid any incoming supplies while we lay siege from land." Stannis' expression didn't change for longer than Jon wanted, feeling a reprimand coming, until the stag smirked. "Good." Jon let out a breath he'd been holding in. "You agree?" "Of course I do," Stannis nearly laughed, making Jon smile. Stannis' smiles were rarer than his own, Davos once told him. "It's a good plan, but don't go around me again, Stark." He raised a singular finger in the air. "You hear? Run something like that by me next time." "Yes, your grace." "I'm sorry." "Don't be, just be better." "I will." "You trust this Theon to get it done." "I know he'll try." Jon pursed his lips in consideration. "He saved my sister, and I was raised beside him. He's a different person now, but I hope he can." "False kings, usurpers," Stannis seethed, keeping his eyes on the horizon. "Balon Greyjoy, Tommen Lannister, Daenerys Targaryen." Jon rocked back, somewhat stunned. Daenerys Targaryen? A silver dragon, alone and in peril. He remembered Master Aemon keeping tabs on her, hearing bits and pieces about the old man's last living family, how she possessed 3 dragons, an army and a kingdom across the narrow sea. Jon didn't know what to think about there being living dragons. Seemed outlandish to him. Then again, he'd seen ice monsters leading an army of dead men north of the wall. Dragons were nothing out of the ordinary in comparison. Yes, Stannis said. The foreign whore, she'll come to Westeros eventually. Really? Aye, and we'll need to be ready. Does she really have dragons? Jon shivered at the thought of a fire-breathing dragon bearing down on him. Perhaps, I don't know, Stannis replied, shaking his head. I've only heard that she does. When she lands, and if she does, my throne will be all that she sees. She will be hard to stop. 3 dragons, a Targaryen alone in the world, Jon muttered under his breath. What was that? Stannis snapped his head in Jon's direction. Nothing, Your Grace. Jon inclined his chin with a small smile. Just something I heard once. The king's eyes lingered on the Stark for a few moments. Jon held his gaze. Finally, Stannis said, If it's true, if she's truly the Dragon Queen, 3 full-grown dragons. His voice left him, words failing. Jon finished the sentence. Who could stop her? There's always a way, and I am the prince that is promised. I'll find a way. Stannis grunted, looking back out. We should be off. With that, he descended down the steps behind them. Jon turned around, taking in Winterfell before him, his home, a place he'd fought so hard to retake, but now had to leave. He watched over all the people in the courtyard, working. Some carried wood planks to places that needed repair. Others hammered breastplates. He saw Stannis walk over to their waiting horses. Speaking with some of his bannermen there, Lord Reed and Brienne lightly chatting beside their horses, waiting for Jon. Ghost and Shaggy Dog sharing one last romp together, as if sensing they would be apart once more. Sansa and Rickon came out of the keep and entered the open air. They strolled into the middle of the courtyard, then stopped when they saw Jon staring at them. The Lord of Winterfell moved down the ramparts until his boots sunk into the mud. His feet carried him until he stood before his brother and sister. When he got there, he smiled and raised his arms to all around them. You'll take care of the place while I'm gone? Sansa grinned as Rickon stepped forward quickly, careening into Jon's chest and wrapping his arms around his brother. Jon laughed, returning the hug, burying his nose into Rickon's curly locks. Then he felt another form wrap around the two of them. He knew it to be Sansa. The 3 Starks stood there for a while, just holding each other, closer than ever before, until Sansa and Rickon broke the embrace, eyes watering. Jon raised his eyebrows, dropping to a knee so he'd be eye level with Rickon. Don't cry. I'll be back. I'm coming back. I'll return to my home. He removed his gloves, then brushed his smaller sibling's tears away. Don't worry. Rickon embraced his brother again, his sniffles buried in Jon's chest. Then the tiny Stark looked up at Jon. I don't want you to go. I don't want to go either, little one. Jon frowned, mouth pressed into a tight line. But I must. Why? Because I made a promise, and I must keep it. As father would. Sansa stepped forward, wrapping her fingers through Rickon's hair. Come on, Rickon. Jon has to go. Reluctantly, Rickon let go, backing up, unable to stop the flow of tears from his eyes. Jon turned to Sansa. His sister stepped close, as Jon lightly cupped her face, placing a kiss on her forehead, using his thumbs to wipe her tears. I'm coming back. I know, she said, taking a deep breath. We'll miss you. Jon let go of her and began backing up. The lone wolf dies. Sansa put her arm around Rickon, the two of them watching Jon climb his horse next to Stannis. Their brother shared one last glance at them before he smiled and left with Stannis out the open gate that they just charged through just some days ago. Ghost hot on his master's heels, bolting out into the open space beyond Winterfell's gates. Whispering, Sansa finished the sentence for her brother. But the pack survives. You actually keep them around your neck? Brienne asked, incredulous. Grinning, Divos held up his left hand, missing the tops of his pinky, ring, and middle fingers. Aye, keep him for luck. Been good luck too. I wouldn't consider being locked up for months on the order of the Lady Melisandre to be good luck to us. Jon replied, smirking. Each of the men and the one woman bobbed on their horses. Close to arriving at Moat Kylan, the vast expanse of grass left not much to do except banter among themselves. Well, the Lady Shireen would come down to read to me, and I had plenty of time to learn to read myself in that cell, so I consider it good luck. Howland Reed laughed, reaching over to slap Jon on the back of his leather gambeson. He's got you there, my lord. Jon rolled his eyes before laughing with the others. Aye, that is good luck, Davos. Brienne wasn't laughing, still slightly queasy about the whole thing. Her duty to Rensley still applied, but also her duties to Catelyn and Jon. If she was going to gain revenge for Rensley's death, she would have to know everything she could about Stannis Baratheon's confidants. Still, isn't it morbid, Stannis, to cut off your fingers for helping him? Stannis has a keen sense of justice, Davos replied. I lived my life as a smuggler, and so the fingers were punishment for that. However, I earned Stannis' trust, so he made me his advisor, and now his hand. The kind of man and king his grace is, rewarding when need be, and punishing when need be. Sounds of cursing rang out some ways behind them. Lady Brienne, Podrick rode up, mud covering his cuirass. Wagon stuck in the mud. They're asking for you. Well, why can't you handle it? Podrick looked sheepish. Need another hand, and no soldier would listen to a boy from the Westerlands. It was clear he was censoring the actual words used. A snarl left Brienne. 7 hells, do I have to cut your meat for you two? Reining in his horse, the Lady Knight trotted off to the rear with her squire. Ever missed the smuggling life, Lord Davos? Howland asked after the three stopped laughing. I enjoyed traveling through Westeros with Lord Stark during the rebellion. Not the fighting, mind you, but seeing the rest of our 7 kingdoms. Only had seen Harrenhal and the northern Riverlands beforehand. That question caused Davos to think. No, I don't. I can provide far better for my family now, but I did enjoy sailing all over the narrow sea. At least be glad you lived such far-flung lives, my lords. Smiling sheepishly, eyes squinting in the high noonday sun, Jon looked out over the horizon, catching the first glimpse of the towers of Moat Cailin. I only learned of such far-flung places in the stories. Aside from one trip to White Harbor, I've never been south of Torrens Square, never left the north. Catching a grimace on Howland's face, Davius was about to inquire, but thought better of it. Why, that's no way to live, Jon. I may not have been some world traveler like Oberyn Martell or that insane brother of Balon Greyjoy, but as a smuggler I traveled all over. Saw Pentos, Brevavos, Dorne, the Reach, Lyce. The older man grinned, dropping his voice into a whisper so that his son, Jon's squire, wouldn't hear. I love my wife desperately, but what she doesn't know won't hurt her. The 3 men shared a laugh. Gotta see the world before yak settle down, Jon. A wistful look appeared on Jon's face. My father was fostered in the Vale, so saw much. He told me the area was beautiful, but I always did wish to see Dragonstone. Where Aemon the Dragon Knight was raised, oh, how he and Robb had spent hours in the courtyard at a time. Aemon and his brother Duncan the Tall. Stannis' seat is Dragonstone. I'm sure he'd host you there. Davos pondered it. 7 hells, he'd probably give you the damn place after all you've done. Couldn't very well turn that down, Jon mused. But I'd have to ride south to maintain it every now and again, and Starks don't fare well in the south. My father rode this very road for a Baratheon king, and memories of his father were like that, happiness and joy, followed by a deep sadness that Jon would never see Eddard Stark again. An errant tear formed in his eye. He promised that he'd tell me about my mother. Jon didn't know why I was divulging this. Only Sam and Maester Aemon, but with the memory stabbing into his heart, he could use the fatherly advice of the 2 older lords. I knew your mother. Jon's head jerked to look at Howland Reed with shock. Davos blinked as well, intrigued. Didn't know her as well as Ned did, but I did see her. Jon could feel his body tremble. Who was she? His eyes clouded with tears, finally able to put an identity on his mother. Howland shook his head. I don't remember her name, but I do remember she was of the north. A pair of gray eyes widened. Knew your father when they grew up in Winterfell together. He's not ready for the actual truth. No one is. Not while any Baratheon or Lannister king lives. Lovely, carefree girl. Loved to ride. Was in Harrenhal when Ned saw her. Then the next time was in Dorne, when we took you back north. Is she alive? Jon hesitated to ask, but needed to know. No, my lord, she died in Dorne from childbirth with you. God's help me, that is not a lie. 7 hells, I'm sorry, lad, Davos offered, reaching out to put a fatherly hand on Jon's shoulder. Lips pursed, eyes shut as he dipped his head. Jon was beyond tears. Thank you, Davos. He looked up, meeting Howland's gaze with a sad smile, resignation in his expression. I'm glad you told me. He chuckled, a dry one that didn't reach his eyes. I didn't expect my mother to be a northerner. I guess that explains my father's reluctance. Didn't want to damage anyone's memory, especially one known in Winterfell. Gazing out at the clouds, the waving winter demons that draped themselves over the north to herald such a desolate time. At that very moment, the clouds had split apart to reveal the sun. My lords, the three of them glanced upward as three riders approached. One a dispatcher, helmeted and carrying a fluttering flaming heart banner of House Baratheon of Dragonstone. The second, Carsey, looking quite uncomfortable atop her horse. Only White Walkers rode north of the wall. The other was Melisandre. Her lips set in triumph. This is not going to be good. The rider bowed from the saddle. Urgent news. Tell me, Davos replied gruffly. As the Hand, he technically outranked all others. Well, don't dither around like a fool. Tell your hand. The dispatch rider cleared his throat. Wildzel. He paled slightly at the presence of Jon, the champion of those from north of the wall. Free folk scouts have spotted the Lannister host. They're at the Twin. Jon furrowed his brows. Leave River Run to the Blackfish? That would cut off their supply lines to the Westerlands. Casterly Rock was far closer to the Twins than King's Landing was. Jaime Lannister wasn't the caliber of general as Tywin or Robb was, but the Lannister armies had veterans such as Leo Lefford, Adam Marbrand, and Roland Crakehall. Are you sure it wasn't just reinforcement of the Twins? Said Castle was practically one of the best positions in Westeros for defense. My lords don't lie, Lord Crow, Cersei replied. The lines of gold armor, as they said, stretch along the northern King's Road for leagues. The vanguard already passing through the bridge castle. Jon knew not to discount the skills of free folk wards. Perhaps the Blackfish abandoned River Run, knowing we were coming, Howland suggested. He gets nothing if the Lannisters defeat us, then turn on him. We win, he wins. Simple as that. Looking at Carsey, Jon gave the orders as Warden of the North. Only King Stannis outranked him in authority over his northern subjects. Find the Tully forces, have both wargs and foot scouts searching. We need to know if we can count on such reinforcements. Ah, Lord Crow. Carsey bowed, half sarcastically, before urging the horse off to the other wildlings. Jane smirking with amusement as she winced, unused to the saddle. The king requires your presence at the field headquarters, the dispatch rider finished, finally allowed by Jon to speak once more. We are witnessing legends being written, my lords, Melisandre stated, the ghost of a smirk on her lips. She had been largely absent in Winterfell, confining herself to her quarters except for several meetings with Stannis, to consult the auspices within the flames, as she explained before the march from Winterfell began. Her red eyes, a gentle burgundy rather than a piercing crimson, bored in on Jon. The Lannisters think they are the Golden Ones, but it is our king and his loyal disciples that will bring the light to their darkness. With that, she turned and galloped off. Unlike Carsey, her riding was top-notch. Shrugging, Davos shared a wry grin. Told Yats she confuses me, but I don't disagree with her sentiment. Jon nodded, motioning to Brienne, Podrick, Devon, and his three other household guard behind him. Well, we can't keep the king waiting. A flick of the reins sent the lords and their retinue forward. The woman who helped Arya took her back to her cottage. It was a nice enough place, for a minstrel of sorts at least, as Arya learned. The woman was called Lady Crane, or such as she was referred to. Crane patched up Arya to the best of her ability, going on about dealing with stitches many times before. The waif had truly done quite the number on Arya. Lip busted wide open, a few cuts along her arms and legs, bruises the size of a fist. Crane made a mediocre soup. It tasted awful, but anything sustenance felt good to Arya. Crane regaled her about the many plays she'd been a part of. The words didn't make much sense to Arya. She'd never heard of a performance such as Crane explained. After Arya put away 2 bowls of soup, Crane watched the girl pass out in her bed, not daring to do anything to stop her, just smiling and leaving her in peace. The next morning, Arya woke with a start, her mind reminding her of the events of the last couple days. Battling off the confusion of where she was became the first thing she did, reflexes snapping in. Waking up in the dark never ceased to scare her. The loss of her eyes had taken more than her sight. The little girl from Winterfell returning to visit, sometimes for long spans. Crane came in quickly, hearing the startle. Her presence calmed Arya, the welcoming warmth, unlike anything she'd seen since Winterfell. After some more soup, Arya explained she had to return the street corner. Knowing the wife would be there waiting, Crane pleaded with her to stay, or at the very least help her make it back. Neither options appealed to Arya. If the blindness was a test, as she assumed she shouldn't take help from anyone, if it was just a punishment in essence, the wife likely wouldn't visit her. Despite their constant never-ending obvious hatred for her, attempting further training with her doesn't make sense unless it's a test. Not hearing any arguments, Crane assisted Arya back to street level. Like a hawk, she watched Arya wander down the street, fighting off notions to help. Thankfully, Crane's place wasn't too far from the market. Arya found her way back after a while, and then the path back to her street corner not too long after that. Her body making up for the lack of her sight, senses taking advantage. She felt herself grow a bit stronger, whether from her belly full of food or a newfound fortitude to move forward. The waif made herself known as soon as Arya turned the corner and descended the steps. "Where were you?" she asked. If Arya could see her face, she was sure there'd be a scowl on it. Rosiera slowly made her way down the steps, hugging the wall nearest her. Not immediately replying, the waif stomped her foot. "I asked you a question." The blind one finally reached the bottom, near the faceless man. The waif approached Arya, who didn't waver. A wooden staff rolled to her feet. It was picked it up quickly. What followed was an interaction not dissimilar from their last, though this time Arya stood her ground. As the waif wailed on her, she didn't falter, retaliating as best she could, swinging back, having no idea if she'd hit anything, resulting in her rapidly flinging the staff around in all directions around her. Quickly, she realized the waif was gone. If she had still been there, surely she would have stuck by now. The presence of her sparring partner gone, the stick dropped to the ground with a clatter, returning to her small space on the ground, trying to rest, though the gravel-like ground didn't much compare to the feather bed in Crane's apartment. Many days after went on similar to the last, waiting for the waif to come to her. Eventually, Arya became accustomed to the darkness. Having been in it so long, she'd been adapted to survive in it, even thrive. All her other senses heightened. She became able to track the waif as she moved, honed in on her breathing. The small sounds of her feet gliding over the stone ground. No longer could the waif dance around her in senseless bliss. Surprising the waif back, bringing the staff up to thwart a downward swing. Arya was able to parry and block incoming blows. Soon after that, she could attack, get on the offensive. The waif left that day in a huff, all twisted up in anger. When she was gone, Arya laid back down and fell asleep as soon as her eyes closed. The next day, she felt the presence of someone else, not the wife. If a girl follows, she may get her eyes back. Much to her delight, Arya's sight was returned. Once again able to see, enjoy the vigors of vision. Her gained abilities from the time she spent in the darkness didn't falter or dissipate, yet felt reinvigorated and empowered. She could hear the fluttering of birds in the open air or the low tones of people murmuring. All her senses seemed heightened. Never had she felt more complete, more able. But also, much to her dismay, the god of death claimed a person that recently grew close to her, a punishment of sorts for her weakness, even worse that she should carry out the deed. These people she'd shacked up with, seeking the abilities that would give her vengeance for her family's destruction. She'd done it unknowing what it would cost her. She only saw what she wanted from them. Possibly a bit of bad judgment on her part, but she couldn't take it back. It's not all bad, though. Now she had gained the skills she needed. The person the god of death had claimed was Lady Crane for reasons unknown. They had given her to Arya to take care of. It's not surprising that they somehow knew Crane had helped her, even though it was just the one time. She hadn't seen Crane since then. Arya assumed it was a test to see if she was truly loyal to the faceless men. Her loyalties weren't even clear to her. She knew she needed to take vengeance against those that had wronged her family. Even now, she remembered the names. Cersei Lannister, the Mountain, Ayn Payne, the Red Woman, Beric Dondarrion, Thyrsa of Nyr, Walder Frey. The others had either been ended by her own hand or taken care of by someone else. Even in Bravos, she'd heard of the deaths of Tywin and Joffrey. Taking the lives of the rest was the only thing she desired now. None of them were on this side of the sea. They all breathed in Westeros, so that's where she'd needed to go. It wasn't hard to find possible passage back across the sea to Westeros. After a brisk walk through the port, she discovered the seaman frequented a tavern nearby. Therefore, there would be the best spot to begin her search for a boat to take her home. The smell of the laughter brought her there, also the dank smell of alcohol filling the air. Her feet carried her through the wooden double doors, nearly recoiling at the sound of all the voices, jeering and sneering at each other. Several tables littered with greasy men bashing their jugs of wine together. Rosiera strolled through, listening in, hearing all sorts of conversation, much about Brivos, these big fish they caught. Whispers of the ongoings of events in Westeros. She didn't really listen to them. Near the back, two men sat together. They looked professional enough and Westerosi. She could smell the seawater off them from a distance. One of them had dark hair, with a bushy bear, and the other was an older man with a white beard. They saw her approach, the older one said. "Unless you're going to bring us more wine, fuck off." Rio ignored him. "You're from Westeros? I'd like to go home." The dark-haired one stroked his beard and said, "You can't afford it, girlie." In response, Uri tossed a sack of silver on the table, and older one snatched it up and peered inside. "Where'd you get this from?" "What does that matter?" They looked at each other, and then back to her. "We leave in 2 days. You can have a hammock." The second sack of silver hitting the table nearly had them turning pale. "I want a cabin." "Sure," one of them said. "Whatever you want." Then grabbed the bags before they could stuff them in their pockets. "We'll also be leaving at dawn. See you then." With that, she turned from them, leaving the two of them in tailspin. When the sun rose the next day, the prospect of returning home excited her, even though the unknowns that hung over her, having no idea what she'd find when she arrived. News from the West rarely carried to Braavos, aside from the large events like a king dying. So whatever waited for her across the narrow sea would be a total surprise. Surely she'd hear some mumblings over her journey home, hopefully some good things. But she wasn't deluded. The possibility of things being worse than she left them could be high. She left her family in disarray. They'd likely still be in the same shape, or so she guessed. From the cobble streets of Braavos, she watched the sun rise, feeling excited this was her last day in the city. She'd be going home, today. The little girl in her rearing its head, yet the grown woman inside gritted her teeth, steeling her resolve to what she'd needed to do. Revenge! Moments later, her mind wandered to Lady Crane. She hadn't considered what would become of her. The faceless men wanted her dead, and they wanted her to be the one to kill her. When she decided to leave, she assumed that Crane would be left alone. Her mind began to wonder if that was true or not. Would they leave her be? It didn't take her long to decide that they definitely wouldn't leave her alone. Perhaps she could go retrieve her and take them with her across the sea. But what if it's a trap? What if the faceless men know she's trying to leave, and maybe they think she'll go back for Crane, where the waif will be waiting to kill her? There's no telling what they'll want to do to her after she neglects to kill Crane as they want. It's likely they'll want to add her face to the hall. Of course, Arya should avoid that outcome, even if it means leaving Crane to them to take care of themselves. In the end, the woman doesn't mean all that much to her anyway. Crane provided help when it was needed, and that's it. To do what she needed to do, perhaps she needed to let certain feelings die. The more human tendencies allow herself to leave an innocent woman to die because her life isn't worth the risk of losing her own. Not when she has things left to do. She didn't let herself care about Crane as she boarded the ship, merely emotionless as they cast off as she watched Braavos get farther and farther away until totally out of sight. The roars and cheers left the throats of tens of thousands of onlookers like an undulating wave, echoing off the bowl of the great fighting pits, finally reopened after years. The last time the great city of Meereen had provided such bread and circuses for the masses had been just before the Mother of Dragons had liberated, or sacked, for those with a differing viewpoint, Yonkai, and a sense of excitement had descended on the city. Paying the modest fee to catch a glimpse of the once-in-a-lifetime spectacle, the first games of House Targaryen. First ever with the participation restricted to free men competing for glory and gold, not for their master's whims, heralding a new beginning for Meereen and all of Slaver's Bay. In one fluid sweep of their hands, the various fighters slammed their fists against their chests in salute. "We who are about to die," they each proclaimed in Valyrian. Some their native tongue, some obviously foreign by their halting accents. "Fight for the glory of our names and our queen. I would rather you lived for me, noble fighters." Daenerys watched the scene with numbness, a simmering anger, and quite a lot of apprehension. Even free men, she did not wish any of these men to die for the amusement of the crowd. Though Westerosi tourney melees sometimes ended in death, it was never an intended prospect. Your Grace, the syrupy words of her husband, Hisdar Zoloric, brought her out of the reverie. You must stand and clap before it can begin. The people are likely getting impatient. Wishing she could just end this, Daenerys nevertheless stood, radiant in her white, form-fitting dress and gossamer cape, matching the silver of her hair and the fairness of her Valyrian features near perfectly. The representation of the ancient adage of true-born Valyrians being the manifestation of the divine upon the earth. Slowly, gingerly, Dany raised her hands up, the clap resounding across the pit. The raucous cheer only came a split second later, fighters already charging at each other in the vicious melee. Beside her, Dany could sense the normally soft-spoken Hisdar. For the life of her, she would never see him as her husband, was transformed into an excited spectator at the fight. There's a brute from the Summer Isles, he commented, pointing to a rather large fellow with dark skin. He brought a large mace down upon a smaller man, lighter-skinned and darting out of the way. And he's from the Yeti, you can tell from the curved sword. Very rare in these parts. We're in for a treat. I bet on the little one, Dario commented. You can tell he wants it. As did I when I fought in these pits. He smirked as the Yoti expertly sidestepped an attack, lashing out with his sword to draw blood. Yep, he'll win. Easier looked at him incredulously. Size matters here, Nakaras? The sellsword grinned. Oh? How's about 10 gold dragons on it? Done. The words had only just been spoken when the Summer Islander brought the mace down directly on the smaller man's head, blood spurting out. Hisdar laughed, slapping Dario on the back. I'll expect my money on the morrow. Daenerys simply rolled her eyes at the antics. Men had their lust for combat, and she didn't begrudge that, but for fighting pits, it was just so senseless. Pardon, Your Grace? Daenerys looked down to see Tyrion waddle to the chair to her right. Forgive me for being late, but I had some matters to attend to. Oh? Suddenly, a particular competitor removed his helmet, causing her breath to hitch. Jorah! He'd appeared out of nowhere yet again for the second time. One might have thought that after being sent away not once, but twice, would beget a hesitancy to ever appear again. Yet here Sir Jorah was, fighting for her amusement. A part of her wished for his head to be separated from his shoulders. Another part just wanting him far away from her. Though deep inside her, she knew that either one of those things would disappoint her. Tell me, Lord Tyrion. I need a distraction, she said, but her eyes kept firm on Jorah, watching with bated breath as the master swordsman of Bear Island hacked and slashed his way through the other fighters. Shifting uncomfortably in his seat, Tyrion reached out for the chilled wine on the serving table. I realized that even the noble families of Meereen are rather greedy. They live in luxury despite your Grace's taxes, so that means the Sons of the Harpy must be getting outside support. The words registered in her ear, but Dany was too concentrated on not showing her fear outwardly as the large Summer Islander charged at Jorah. The knight's sword only just stopped the mace from cleaving his skull. Therefore I had Varys' little birds track several suspected Harpy spies, and it seems like we've found where the funds are coming from. Seeing Jorah start to gain the upper hand, Daenerys allowed herself the breathing room to look at Tyrion. Where she would take Rhaegal and Viserion there to burn wherever it was down. Tyrion grimaced. Volantis, my queen. The rich slavers there are funneling funds through a stopper and Yunkai in order to foment uprisings here. At least that's what it looks like. Yrnie's blood boiled, fists clenching. Images of the city of Volantis, a pile of ash and flame, coursed through her mind, of the lesson that she would teach the slaver scum of what would happen if they so dared to tangle with House Targaryen. My queen! Her eyes swiveled to the pits just as Jorah tossed a spear in her direction, only to hit a figure running at her from behind. A clash of steel directed her attention to Ser Barristan. Removing his sword from the gut of a blue silk swathed man, blood spurting as he fell to the floor, both wore the masks of the Sons of the Harpy, and behind them, all amongst the stands, hundreds began to don the masks. Revolt! Barely several minutes had passed, but already it seemed like hours. The pits had descended into complete and total anarchy, blood blanketing the soil in a malevolent crimson. Already strewn on the ground was the broken body of Hisdar, Zolorok, The broken bodies of at least a dozen Unsullied, countless innocents that had their lives taken away by the Sons of the Harpy for the cardinal sin of enjoying the games their queen put on for them. Said queen was currently being dragged by Daenerys, refusing to let go of her handmaiden's hand. The Daenerys watched as several bare-chested or blue-clad harpies rushed them, Unsullied taking a ragged formation to block their path. Satrajora, the faithful bear, took the van, his sword already slick with the blood of the harpies. Satrabachan lagged near the back of the pack, taking on any stragglers that trailed them. They fought their way towards the alternate exit tunnel, the one pointed out by Hisdar before his death. Daenerys felt nothing for him, but now the carnage was reaching those she did care about. Now a harpy hefted his body up, only to saw through his neck with a thin blade. Moments later, the harpy lifted Hisdar's head up, gore dripping to the floor, before throwing it as far as he could in Daenerys' direction. A sign of what's to come, in their minds anyway. "Go," Barristan yelled, deflecting a giant scimitar as if it were a twig. The harpies had bloodlust, but little skill. Dario soon joined him. Fluid movements leaving two bare-chested attackers with disemboweled stomachs. "We'll hold them off." Unsullied lifting their shields to ward off arrows, Darry and her companions ducked into the exit tunnel. Bright sunlight ahead of them, Jura reached out his uninfected hand to literally haul Daenerys along the tunnel. "Almost there, Khaleesi. They would be far safer in the open streets among the people." "Almost there." Out of thin air appeared two harpies, bare chests tanned as the inhuman masks stared at them. Pushing closed the heavy wooden door that now blocked their path. Jura slammed on the door, kicking it, but it wouldn't budge. Damn. The idea was to return the fighting pits to their former glory. Daenerys had allowed animals to be trapped and taken to the pits to be used during the fighting. As soon as the harpies began their attack, they set loose two lions, jumping out into the ring, roaring out loud enough that everyone could hear, then creeping towards the group, teeth bared and eyes menacingly narrowed, sword twirling in his wrist, a trick he picked up from Arthur Dayne while the Sword of the Morning had lived. This moment wasn't the first that Barristan wished for the steel plate of his Stormland-style armor. Functional in the humid heat of Slaver's Bay, his leather cuirass was, but able to protect against the claws and fangs of a great beast, it was not. Beside him, Dario bounced on his feet, curved arc at the ready. They spread their arms wide, hoping to intimidate the lions. It did not work. With a roar, one of the beasts leapt at Barristan, claws bared. Even dulled by age, Barristan's reflexes were still sharp. He raised the shield quickly to absorb the weight of the leaping lion. But it still sent him sprawling to the ground, fangs ripping the shield away as the wind was knocked out of him. Slashing at him with its paws, the beast missed Dario by a wide berth. Dearth of armor and small blade, leaving him quick on his feet, able to maneuver around the lunges of the lion, dashing forward with his arc, drawing blood and darting back before the lion could claw at him. Coughing, sucking in air, Barristan instinctively rolled onto his stomach as the lion leaped, teeth bared to rip out the knight's neck, but only tearing through the air. Cloud of dust kicked up, causing the lion to howl as it hit its eyes. Barristan rolled back onto his back and allowed the castle-forged steel to sing in a downwards cut. Tasting bright red blood as it bit into flesh and bone, the lion howled in pain, much as did Dario, as a swipe of the paws slashed against his torso, or sallying forth to rip open the creature's neck, lunging at Barristan once more with fury in its eyes. But the cagey old knight was ready for it. Angling his sword, the beast ran itself through the heart, blood spurting everywhere as the life ebbed from it. Dario spat on the dusty ground, quickly parrying the charging blow of a squat, fat harpy before slicing open the expansive stomach. His chest hurt like hell's, but kept fighting. Especially as the royal party emerged from the exit tunnel. "It's blocked," Jerry exclaimed, his sword joining the fray as the Unsullied formed a tight perimeter around Missandei, Tyrion, and the Queen. Fuck, he could hear the rushing feet of far more coming for them. Form a circle, tight in the middle. There wasn't much else to do. Keep the Queen in the open, and hope reinforcements arrived soon, wiping the blood and sweat off his brow as they raced for the center of the arena. Dario glanced at Daenerys, seeing her face serene and pleading, gaze angled to the heavens. Reziagel, Vaziro, come. Please come. But all that answered her were the piercing shrieks from the harpies, flooding into the pits with knives and short swords, masks of glittering gold molded into that of pure malevolence. Some brash ones charged immediately. The Unsullied gut them down, one apparently leading the pack skewered by Ser Barristan. The old knight having pushed off the lion carcass and scrambled to his feet. But even with the dozen taken down with ease, there were still hundreds. "Stay behind me, Khaleesi," Jorah remarked, hands tight on the hilt of his sword. Despite his past, despite his betrayal, Dany complied, finding a sense of safety behind her oldest protector. She and Missandei clutched at each other, flinching as the line of blue or gold-swaddled harpies darted forward, rippling menacingly. Eyes shut, Daenerys did something she never had before. Prayed. Prayed to whatever was out there for a savior. Images flashed in her mind. Of a white wolf. One that she beseeched the very heavens were here. Daenerys knew not what the wolf even was, but craved it by her side even so. Please. What echoed through the pit was not the howl of the wolf, but it was salvation all the same. The bloodlust that gripped the harpies morphed, confusion and worrying evident even with the expressionless masks. All looked to the skies, blue and unblemished, but clearly from where the roars had come from, and there they were. Not only the cream and green bat-shaped creatures, but also that of pure black and red, a demon from the fires of old Valyria. Roars and shrieks shaking the very core of the harpies, as that of the demons ridden into battle by the Targaryen conquerors of Westeros. Fear ripping through those that stood against her. For Daenerys, it was a slow arriving joy. Drogon, all of her children had come. It was like a blur, all passing by her vision in both slow motion and fast forward. How Drogon leapt into her defense, point-blank immolating the harpies in red-hot dragonfire, of Rhuideal and Viserion, still aloft as they spread their flames upon the forces in the stands, giving cover to their brother before scorching the tunnels so that none could be used against their mother ever again. No force could hope to stand against them. Ruzierg and Florzirian, screeching madly, tongues of flame angling towards fleeing harpies. Daenerys approached Drogon, her child hooting in pain, jet-black skin marred with several gaping wounds. A pair of spears still sticking out. The air was pungent with smoke and charred flesh, but Dany paid it no need. Surlily, she wrapped her hands around one of the spears, pulling it out. Drogon screamed in pain and fury. "Shah!" Softly stroking his snout, Dany quickly pulled out the other spear. "It's all right, sweetling," the dragon growled, allowing his mother to gently climb atop him. Pulling his sword out of the now still corpse of a harpy, Barristan turned to watch his queen, eyes widening as she mounted the great dragon. In awe as a dragon rider emerged onto the earth for the first time since the Dance of Dragons. If only Rhaegar could have seen this. His heart ached for his dead friend, but soared to see his legacy live on. "My children!" Despite nothing but a murmur, all three turned their heads to her. Leaning to hug Drogon's neck, the last whisper changed everything. Sogon, and with a mighty flap of his wings, Drogon leapt into the air with his mother. Brothers following close behind, screeches and hoots echoing all across the great city. And Daenerys, watching all of it with observant eyes, could have sworn hearing the mournful howl of the white wolf from her dreams, begging her, calling her to her homeland, taking in a breath of the crisp air. As Drogon climbed ever higher, Dany lost herself into the moment. The blood of old Valyria returned to the skies. The markings upon the map, displayed in front of the collection of men and women, signified far more than mere squiggles and figurines on paper. Fresh upon the soil of the Riverlands, the Baratheon army had found their Lannister counterparts. The host, commanded by the Kingslayer himself, camped only 2 miles to the west, straddled upon the road to the twins abutting the King's Road, a titanic clash inevitable between them. There wasn't any snow falling in the Riverlands, but that didn't make it any less cold. Braziers burning hot to ward it off. I remember riding with my father down this very same road. Small John Umber remarked, standing with his hands over the fire. "We needed the twins then to get to Riverrun, and we need it now, else we get cut off from the north." "Agreed," said Davos. "We must engage the Kingslayer, bad ground or no. Defeat him, and take the twins. Taking the twins will destroy House Frey's reputation, regardless of whether that oath-breaking fuck manages to escape. there were few people that Jon fully despised. Walder Frey was one of them. The entire Riverlands would likely defect to us as they did to Aegon the Conqueror if we secure a victory, and this is our best chance. The young Lord Surin spoke up. Are we sure that Lothar Frey hasn't brought up his bannermen with the Kingslayer? Howland Reed shook his head. My scouts have only found the banners of House Bracken, House Piper, House Mudd, and House Mallister. Around 4,000 men, more or less, so the Kingslayer outnumbers us. When the king spoke, all fell silent, not as decisively as the Boltons did, and we defeated them. He looked to his hand. Any word of the Blackfish? 2,000 men of House Tully. They could go a long way. Davos shook his head. No, your grace. Neither hide nor hair of him has been spotted since news of River Wren's abandonment. Stannis mouthed something, and from his position, Jon could make out the word shit. Very well, our plans will not change. Everyone but Lord Stark, Lord Seaworth, and Lady Melisandre will retire to their commands, including you, my queen. Casting a hateful glare at Jon, Queen Silas led the lords out. Hands splayed across the table, Stannis stared intently at the map. Jaw locked firmly in thought, but to those that knew him, they could tell the king was in pain. Teeth clenched in agony, bracing his upper body through the table. His hand, his prophetess, and his most trusted field commander, all of them saw the bevy of masters and healers trudge into his tent with fresh bandages. All heard the screams and muffled grunts of the king, followed by the blood and pus-stained washcloths marked for burning afterwards. Stannis' leg wound was acting up again, plunging him into mild fever and a quite non-mild pain. Glancing over at Jon surreptitiously, Davos cleared his throat. Your grace, perhaps it would be best if— I know, Devasius, the king replied gruffly. Believe me, I know. It seemed as if he was using all his strength to keep from collapsing. But I can't be a true king if I don't stand with my men on the field of battle. Robert did it. Ridgegar did it. I must. No one is doubting your bravery, your grace, Jon interjected. He understood hell's his wounds still ached, even the ones that happened months ago. But there was no point in fighting if one was unable to fight. But you are the king. What purpose would it serve if you allowed yourself to be killed? Stannis said nothing, letting the low firelight dance upon his face. The Baratheon brothers were driven, that much was clear. Stannis, he thought, fully able and willing to engage in the hard slog. In acts, some would say, were mad. Not even the most debilitating of wound fevers would keep him from the object of his ambition. Lady Melisandre, he finally said, have you seen any visions in your flames that can give me guidance? The red woman blinked, the red of her irises shimmering from the fire. She had seen an image in the flames, an image clearer than the daytime sun, but one that she could not share. You must ride on the battlefield, my promised prince. Both Jon and Davos opened their mouths to retort, but her next words cut them off. But if you draw your sword upon the first clash of steel, you will lose. She looked up, upon the trusting look of Stannis, the resigned belief of Davos, and the skepticism of Jon Stark. Sighing, swayed by her definitive answer, Stannis made his decision. I will stay with Lord Sulmy's reserve cavalry guarding our southern flank, around 700 men, the cavalry muscle for many a Stormlands army. Lord Stark. Jon looked up. Yes, your grace. If I cannot fight, I wish to leave command of the main army to you. 4 great clashes have earned you my trust. Castle, Black, Hardhome, Ramsay's Raid, and Winterfell. I would be honored for you to lead our army on the morrow. Jaw dropping slightly, Jon composed himself enough to bow. The honor is mine, your grace. Good. Motioning for 2 of his personal guards, Stannis slung his arms around both of their shoulders, allowing them to prop up his aching leg. Get some sleep, my lords. We'll need it upon first light. Gritting his teeth, the king made his way out. The king has excellent advice. DeVos clasped Jon's shoulder. Don't brood for too long, Jon. With a chuckle, the Onion Knight followed Stannis. Now, it was just him and Melisandre. That wasn't the vision that you saw, correct? Jon could feel the red gaze bore into him. You lied to the king. There was no hesitation from the Red Priestess. Yes, the look of the Shadowlands close to the edge of the known world, intimidating to most, but not to him. A perk of the bastard armor. What did you really see in your fire? Despite his instincts, Jon wanted to know. Jon kept his hands on the tabletop as she circled around the counter to him. For a long while, my visions only contained King Stannis. but ever since we found you at Castle Black, it's been plenty of you instead. Slowly, Jon regarded her as she drew close. What do you mean? Melisandre pressed her front against Jon's arm. You are the one I see. Her hand snaked over his forearm, her chin resting on his shoulder. I see you winning all these battles, not Stannis. Me? You, she whispered, drawing as close to him as she could. Like what? He frowned, ignoring her advances. He resisted the urge to shove her to the ground. Instead, he slowly retreated from her, moving next to the table until he was on the other side away from her. Slightly pouting, Melisandre replied, When I look into the flames, it's you I see, standing over the corpses, having won the battle, sword raised high, cheering with your men. What battle? When? I don't know when, but it's in the snow, she answered with wide eyes as if she's truly telling the future. The snow? A great battle in the snow? She nodded. Yes, you will be victorious, not Stannis. He is the weaker man now. Jon began to question the woman. How could she sing Stannis' praises for so many years to then shed him? As far as he knew, Melisandre was Stannis' biggest supporter, aside from Ser Davos. Why would she turn to him now for no apparent reason, other than those supposed visions she sees in the flames? How do you know all this for sure? Jon asked, putting his hands on his hips, then gesturing at her. How can I truly believe a word you say? Why does your word mean a damn thing to me? How can you honestly think I can just believe you? When you speak of King Stannis this way, all I want is for you to leave. Curiously, the Red Woman slowly cocked her head to the side, unmoved by his words, making Jon feel uncomfortable with her gaze. She lays her hands on the table, then leans forward. What if I could show you? Jon scoffed. Show me what? A vision in the flames? He spoke, filling his voice with mockery. Her wide smirk unnerved Jon, and even further with her reply, I can show you. Without waiting for his reply, she shifted over to a nearby brazier, motioning for Jon to come closer. Hesitant at first, eventually he forced his legs to move. He stopped mere feet from the fire, with Melisandre standing directly above it. The flames licked her cheeks, sticking to her face. She beckoned Jon closer still, and he hesitated yet again. You can't see from all the way over there. Melisandre laughed. When Jon still didn't move, she reached over and took his hand, pulling him over. When the warmth of the flames heated his face, his expression molded to surprise. He didn't see anything immediately, and he'd looked into many different fires many different times. Yet this became different when the flames started to appear like a picture, or perhaps a painting. Not a clear one. It was muddled and dirty, though, very much visible. Melisandre's hand snaked up his back. She whispered to him. What do you see? The battlefield, thousands of men fought each other. Some looked familiar, yes. He saw his bannermen, direwolves on their shields. He didn't recognize the people his men were fighting, not like any army he'd ever seen, looking quite foreign. Something in the distance arose. Something he did recognize. A dragon. A huge, full-grown dragon, scales black as night, shooting flames from its mouth. Roasting a bevy of his men, leaving just piles of bone and ash in its wake. The flames before him roared out near his face, making him rock back in retreat. Though he kept his eyes on the fire, after that the image changed. A throne room. A space larger than any he'd ever seen. Ceilings so tall light from the torches on the walls didn't reach all the way up. The throne looked very strange, carved out of some kind of rock. A person stood near it, with their back to him. In an instant, the person turned towards him, brandishing an ornate dagger of sorts. The light glinted off the blade, blinding him. The fire roared again, brighter and hotter than ever before. Jon backed all the way up until his back hit the table, so hard some of the pieces on top fell over. The image burned into his eyes. Even when he closed them, he saw the dragon and the man with the knife. He rubbed his lids profusely, trying to rid himself of it. It just seemed so real. A dragon? A fucking dragon. Burning his men, a sight he wouldn't soon forget, and hoped he'd never have to actually witness it. And who was that man with the knife? It all seemed so unreal, but it didn't feel like a dream. It felt like he was there. 7 hells, Jon gasped, breathing hard. He put his hand over his heart, feeling it beat hard, threatening to break out of his breastplate. The Red Woman started to move forward, opening her mouth to speak, but Jon held his hand up to silence her. Don't start. I'm going to get some rest. I don't want to see you there." With that, he stomped out of the tent, leaving Melisandre by her lonesome. When he finally climbed into his makeshift bed, he desperately wanted to sleep, but sleep wouldn't come to him. His mind wouldn't stop wondering about what he'd seen in the flames. The image of that massive black beast torching his people ingrained to his mind. The numerous questions he had about the man with the blade, watching his brazier in his tent, almost wishing he could put it out. But then he'd miss the warmth. Eventually, his mind tired, and he slept. Despite the dragons obeying her commands when she needed them, once in the air, Drogon wouldn't hear it. Daenerys watched Mirren fade away in the distance, pleading with her child to take her back to no avail. The dragons would come to her in a time of need, but still weren't the most obedient beasts. It wasn't as if she could just get off, being as though they were hundreds of feet in the air. So she got as comfortable as she could on Drogon's back. There she stayed. Sometime later, Rhaegal and Viserion broke off from formation. Daenerys assumed they became hungry. She thoughts confirmed as Drogon began to descend. They landed on a hill in a wide-open grassy field, with slight mountains in the distance. Dane slid off as soon as she could, desperate to feel the ground beneath her feet after hours in the air. Her legs buckled after not using them for a while. She stumbled into the knee-high grass. When she arose again, Drogon grumbled loud, blowing smoke out of his lungs. Before Dainty could blink, Drogon opened up his wings, bellowing air downward as he jutted into the air, taking off in a moment's notice. Daenerys was nearly knocked off her feet. She called after her child. Drogon, the thought of being left in by herself was too pleasant. But Drogon didn't seem to want to listen. He kept on climbing, not even glancing back at his mother. Nonetheless, Dany yelled out again, "Come back," still her words falling on deaf ears. So, there she stood, in total disbelief, that her child would so blatantly abandon their mother. Feeling hunger rise up in her own self, she had nothing else to do but start walking. She did so until her feet felt as they began to bleed. Her flimsy footwear wore away long before now, along with her dress. The whiteness turned mostly to the color of ash. Her hair had been braided so neatly before, the wind had whipped it much looser. All the soot made it look gray. Eventually, she heard the ground rumble. It continued to rumble until it got louder and louder, her head snapping all around trying to ascertain which direction they were coming from. Though she didn't have to search for long, a sizable cavalry of horsemen crested a hill near her. Once they got closer, she couldn't help but recognize that they were Dothraki. The riding leathers and long braids weren't hard to spot. They circled her in the same path of the already trampled ground, her capture imminent. Dany found herself wishing she'd been dropped off at the slaver master's doorstep. Warmth had returned to the northernmost point of the Riverlands. Large and powerful gusts of warm air from the narrow sea, broiling the southernmost belt from Maidenpool to Seaguard with an unseasonable heat wave. A welcome respite from the coldest of autumns that threatened to further ravage the already battered land. However, in reaches close to the mouth of the River Trident, the warmth barely reached. The northern chill still predominated. Soldiers wrapped themselves in thick wool. Campfires burned throughout the night. But the warmth did reach the lands of House Free in one manner. The mud, oceans of mud, the melting autumn snows left much of the ground waterlogged. Pockets of woodland interspersed with bare grasslands and uneven, rocky terrain. It made for a hard slog, favoring a defender, but neither true Baratheon king nor the Kingslayer was a defender on that day. For Stannis Baratheon, the foe upon the field had to be annihilated in order to open the Riverlands to him. For Jaime Lannister, his host outnumbered the usurper kings. If he was to end the war to bring peace to King's Landing, he would need to seek Stannis out and crush him. Thus, there would be no retreat, no holding back. Both sides would be hitting their enemy head-on, and all knew it. "I'm getting a sense of history repeating itself, my lords," Jaime Lannister breathed. He sat astride his best horse, a cream-colored stallion bred outside Crakehall, much like the Whispering Wood, but with him only an observer. Our massive forces clashing with the Northerners in the Riverlands. Roland Crakehall snorted. That was against Robb Stark, the young wolf. This Jon Snow is but a bastard. No one recognized his legitimacy, since no one recognized Stannis as a true king. "Tread lightly, my lord," stated Bronn flatly, always willing to show up his betters. "Met many a bastard and a lot show better promise than their true-born relatives." The force of the Westerlands were battle-hardened veterans. Adeptly generaled, they arranged themselves in their standard assault formation, 4 divisions abreast of each other, north to south. To the north, better suited to the more waterlogged ground, rested the lighter shields of the Crown Lands, lords under Lord Renfrid Racker. In the center were the Lannister forces themselves, lion banners proudly waving as the Kingslayer's own uncle Tyget rallied them. And bringing up the south were the heavy phalanges of houses Westerling, Lefford, Sweft, and Marbrand, divided into 2 divisions, one under Lord Adam Marbrand and the other under Lord Leo Lefford. In reserve were the Riverlander forces and a detachment of House Crakehall heavy cavalry, ready to exploit any advantage gained or patch in any defect. At the direction of the Kingslayer, the heralds blew their horns, banners unfurled, and men crashing their shields together, while Jaime and Bronn sat atop their horses, staring across the field at their opponent. Without a word, Crakehall moved off to trot around his men. Stannis' forces looked formidable, even from a distance. "How you feeling? Your balls shrinking?" Bronn laughed, slapping Jaime on the back. "Shut up," Jaime jeered, shaking his head. "I don't need you jesting right now." "Oh? Does Stannis have you shaking in your boots?" "Eh?" Bronn smirked, pointing across the field. "We outnumber them. Most of their army is from the north. They don't know how to fight up here. Roosevelt got fucked because he and the Northern Army were totally driven by their hatred for each other. He was driven into a trap because he was blinded by his need to destroy Jon Snow. Stannis fed on that. Now the Boltons are no more." Jaime half laughed. "How does that speak well for us?" "We won't be duped such as that," Bronn said, as if it was obvious. "I won't let you fuck up and die because you still owe me my goddamn castle." Jaime frowned and began to say, "A Lannister always—" "Don't," Bronn sighed, holding his finger in the air. "Don't fucking say it." Opposite, men parted by, as the Lord of Winterfell walked to the van on foot, his faithful sworn sword, Brainy of Tarth, by his side. Stark, direwolf emblazoned on his cuirass and gorget. No horse for him, no rear guard for him. Jon fought with his bannermen, and soldiers from the Reach to the true north loved him for it. "No snow," he said softly, only Brienne hearing it, "does not bode well. The mud will slow us down, my lord, but it will slow them down further." Such is true. Jen did not want Brienne to know of what Melisandre told him, of the battle in the snow, of the only victory preordained being such. "Stay close to your banners, men," he announced, rather matter-of-factly. "I don't need to tell you what to do today. Just know, these are one of the 3 fucks that did the Red Wedding." A hiss arose from the Northerners, soon spreading to all of them. "We killed the fucking Boltons, and we will kill the fucking Freys. But today, we kill the fucking Lannisters." "The North remembers," boomed the army, weapons high in the air as they snarled their bloodlust. The forces of the Stag King were arranged in a single block. Jon, seeing the vast line of the Kingslayer's army strung along the opposing ridgeline, decided to keep his men together and close to their banners. Given the mud and broken terrain, the flanks were guarded well. Small Jon Umber commanded the right guard of Umber, Manderley, and Serwyn forces. Jon personally commanded the center of the Free Folk and remaining Northerners, while Aemon Estermon had the left of Stormland's infantry. The few Northern horse under Laren's Hornwood screened the right flank, while Arstan Selmy guarded the king with the remaining horse further south. "And so it begins, my lord," Brienne murmured as they saw the glittering line of the Pride of the Westerlands starting their advance. "Aye, it does," Jon replied. "Men, forward!" "Knock!" yelled Cersei, her own free folk bowman joined by the Northerners and Stormlanders. "Loose!" A wave of arrows erupted into the air, arcing precipitously before making their journey of death to spill first blood upon the field. The deadly projectiles exploited chinks and exposed flesh. Soon the screams of men joined the din. Arrows slamming into limbs and torsos, spraying blood over the soggy ground. Soldiers collapsed, some loud and hoarse, while others shockingly still, all ignored by their comrades, as the advance took an almost crazed quality. The first to clash were, ironically, the heaviest forces anchoring the south, while weighed down their arms and armor. The Westerlands phalanx and the Stormlands men-at-arms benefited from far drier ground. Arrows, not as much a nuisance, the men were hungry to settle their long-time rivalry and set upon the other with an unparalleled ferocity. Swords hacking, spears thrusting, blood and intestines spilled upon the dead grass as corpses began to pile up. Phalanx advancing while the opposing men-at-arms wheeled to try and flank their foes. Bogged down by the mud, the north and center joined a full 10 minutes later. Spear points became slick with gore as the two middle clusters of hoplites crashed into each other. Lannister men colliding with former men of House Bolton, their shields now painted with snarling Stark direwolves. The center descending into a vicious wrestling contest where each force tried to steamroll the other. Lannister crossbowmen unloading their bolts at point-blank range, while the lighter infantry of House Glover and the mountain clans tried to break the stalemate. To the north, a disorganized mess broke out. Tough as their inhospitable lands, Small John Umber's men proved the steadier in the ensuing bloody melee. Light leathers and male adept to the thick mud. They held their ground against repeated attacks and joined with Lord Hornwood's light cavalry to push them back in a veritable slaughterhouse. Wrecker lost one of his senior bannermen, Osmond Kettleblack, in this early clash. Only fortitude and superiority in armor prevented a complete rout. At the thick of the fighting was Jon. Immersed in the carnage, the same ferocity that made him a legend in the north was on full display. Valyrian steel cut through shields and plate, decapitating and disemboweling as he single-handedly led a furious assault to break through the Lannister phalanx. A sword slashed against his chest, but Jon shrugged it off with a snarl. Men of the Westerlands getting flashbacks of the young wolf defeating them time and time again upon this same kingdom. Only this time something far worse. A bastard, fully trained in the wilding Phaeton style and bled through years of torment, Wolf roared out with an almost dragon-like fury. His sworn bodyguard Brienne of Tarth just as frenzied to protect him as they both hauled a Lannister soldier out of the shield wall. Northern troops pouring through the breach, as Tygett Lannister was forced to withdraw, unable to find any weak spots of their own to probe. In the Lannister command tent, the dispatch riders were running back and forth, Jaime and Roland Crakehall barking orders like mad to manage what order was left within the battle. Every instinct within the Golden Lion of Casterly Rock was yelling within him to join the battle as Jon Snow had, but every word of sense kept him out. Only luck had kept his left-handed swordsmanship from killing him in Dorne, and House Lannister would not be served by its heir dying upon the field. "Where is Mollister?" Roland Crakehall hissed. Without him, the northern-led forces outnumbered the Westerlanders, and Jaime was hesitant to commit his cavalry reserve against Jon Snow after learning what happened at Winterfell. "Terrain is muddy," Jaime reasoned. "Perhaps they're bogged down." Crakehall shook his head. "Too obvious. Mollister was always a lazy fucker." But just as he complained, one of the dispatch riders finally arrived, caked in mud. Lord Yaxley. "Lord Roland." He pulled his horse to them, bowing in the saddle. "Lord Mallister informed me to tell you that he's not advancing." "What?" Jaime was stunned, Crakehall furious, while Bronn just shook his head, not surprised. "That lazy cunt disobeyed a direct order?" He stated that he's worried about Stannis outflanking him. The Stag King was absent from the field. If he had some alternate force ready to strike, it was just like something Stannis would do. "Said he's holding in place." Bronn whistled. "He's planning to switch sides if ye lose. Mark my words. Riverlanders hate House Lannister, and House Frey is a joke to them." Crakehall just growled. "I doubt Jason Mallister has the intelligence to do anything but wipe his ass." Jaime didn't care as to motivation. Without the extra reserves, he did not trust his Westermen to overcome whatever Stannis or Jon Snow came up with. Lord Yangzia uprode Cerulean Stackspear. Yaime's aide-de-camp, Stannis. "Stannis is on the field." But Tykeruden's bird said he was wounded. Confused, Jaime lifted his spyglass, trying to spot the Usurper King. "Where the fuck is he?" "There." Bronn pointed across the field, far to the southeast. "He's on the flanks with their cavalry reserve. Cowardly fucker." The former sellsword spat on the ground. "I fought with a festering chest wound and didn't complain a fucking damn." Quickly, Jaime found the banners of the Stag King, surrounded by about 1,000 Stormlands horsemen of various houses, fully separated from the main host under Jon Snow by at least a mile of uneven ground, not attempting to intercept the main army, just in reserve. The opportunity to end this war right then and there. My lord, Crakehall must have thought on similar lines. "Send me and my mounted knights. I'll slay Stannis and the War of the Five Kings ends right now." "Don't do it," Bronn warned. They sent a trap for that Bolton cunt. They'll set a trap for your knights as well. Running his good hand through his coiffed blonde hair, Jane was faced with the decision of leadership. Should he be bold, or should he be cautious? Father would have known what to do. Father isn't here. It was up to him to make the decisions. Looking back at the history of his father's campaigns, it was boldness that won out, always. Go, Jaime told Crakehall. Bring me Stannis alive. He would treat with Jon Stark once the Stag King was captured. Hopefully negotiate a peace between Tommen and House Stark. His youngest was innocent in the murder of Lord Eddard. Grinning, Crakehall motioned to his son Lyle. House Crakehall, form up. Hold the line, gripping Longclaw with both hands. Jon brought it down with a furious snarl, splintering the iron-bordered shield in two and leaving the trooper a bloody mess. Keep by the banners. So used to fighting in the north, Jon kept an eye on his men and on Lady Brienne, copying their skills in assaulting the heavily armored Westerlands hoplites. Deflecting a sword blow, Jon barreled directly into the man's center mass, sending him into the ground. Grabbing another by the scruff of his woolen gambeson, Jon threw him into the waiting Oathkeeper. All around him, the stench of death coated him in an unbearable vapor, each spurt of blood and voiding of bowels adding to the fetid poison clouding the very air of the battlefield. Only the burning desire for vengeance on each side and the iron will of their commanders kept them going. Small Jon Umber breaking skulls with his bare hands, Tormund hacking with his axes despite 3 crossbow bolts protruding from his chest, Brienne ripping through armor as blood stained her blonde hair, and Jon fighting like a man possessed. To the small folk, their lords fighting with them kept their spirits up against the seemingly impenetrable phalanx. The echoing clatter of hooves boomed over all as House Crakehall began their thunderous charge. Lances depressed in a single line, sunlight glinting off the shiny plate armor. Led personally by the towering form of the strongboar, Cyril Crakehall, the reserve crested the last hill between them and their objective to panic from the milling Stormlanders. Gripping the reins of his steed tightly, King Stannis was ever mindful of the Lady Melisandre's words. Nevertheless, if he couldn't fight, then he could certainly general. His barked commands soon became reality, the wildling archers raining down a fusillade of steel-tipped arrows upon the charging Westermen. Arstan Selmy gathered his outnumbered knights into a countercharge. Brown grass and clumps of dirt kicked into a cloud of dust as the 2 horse charged towards each other. The line rippled, descending into madness. Lances ran through men, bodies thrown back as the screams of dead horses brought terror to man and beast alike. Winter chill, once reviled, was begged for after mere seconds to clear the stench, mere minutes passing before the Stormlanders prayed for reprieve after the second line of Crakehall cavalry slammed into them. Roland Crakehall himself leading a charge to break through and capture Stannis. Hacking through the guarding knights, he came within yards before Arstan Selmy beat him back with his own personal guard. At first, the sound of booming horns from the far south attracted a rather confused response. The second Crakehall charge, having descended into the same furious melee as befalling the entire battlefield, it took moments before a muted shimmer paused all but the most imminent fighting. Many a knight lifting their visors and searching wherever they could for the source of the horns. Galloping at the fastest speeds, the trout banner of House Tully rippled in the high winds as the horsemen charged forth towards the Lannisters. At the van was the aged but still spry Brynden, the Blackfish, leading his men from the front. All were mounted, ditching coherence and strength for speed. A decision that could have spelled doom, but under the current circumstances, proved to be a brilliant move by the Blackfish, for they had arrived just as the battle was in the balance. Using the cover of the thick woods as a shield from Crown scouts, the disorganized cavalry charge was actually perfectly suited to weaving through the underbrush. The Blackfish divided them into 2 columns. The first he led personally at the mass of knights battling each other over the Stag King. Lances, piercing mail and plate, horses and men, toppling over in broken piles of bone, flesh, and metal from the impact of the hundreds of Riverlanders. Shouting over the din, Stannis guided the reinvigorated Stormlanders to double back, assaulting the Crakehall knights head-on. With the first swing of the Blackfish's sword, the balance decisively shifted in the Stag King's favor. A small smile on his face as yet another battle proved the Lady Melisandre right. Revenge for Blackwater Bay was sweet indeed. Wheeling around the three-sided cavalry battle, the second prong charged directly for the main Lannister flank. Mounts taking advantage of the drying ground to crash into the flank guards of House Lefford. Built for strength and momentum, the Westerland's phalanx was notoriously inflexible, a fact taken advantage of by Robb Stark at the Whispering Wood, a fact Jon exploited to keep his lighter command going, and a fact exploited by Brynden Tully as his bannermen brought lance and mace into the soft underbelly of the royal phalanx. What followed was a slaughter. Spotting the charging Riverlanders, Jon grabbed a stark banner of a dying boy and raised it in the air. "The North remembers," he bellowed, direwolf fluttering in the sun as Longclaw caved in a Westerlander's skull. Brienne beside him, armor dented and smeared with blood, as she added Oathkeeper to the fray. The resulting cry was deafening. "The North remembers." Jolted with a newfound energy, the Northerners threw themselves at their enemy. Greatsword tasting Lannister blood, Small Jon Umber led the northernmost house at the crack. Lannisport battalions on the far north of the enemy flank, joined by the Mermen of White Harbor. Glover and Serwyn men held the center, while the final line of Wilding shock troops snarled their fearsome battle cries for the join between the royal center and left. Inadvertently, Jon and Tormund, fighting near alongside, had discovered the Lannister weakness. Unlike their tightly bunched forces, the Lannisters had divided up their legions, creating gaps the frenzied Wildings exploited. To the boys of the Westerlands, Wildings were the stuff of nightmares. Fur-clad savages hacking and killing everyone in sight. Carsey raining volley after volley of arrows, while the Riverlands horse gutted their own bowmen. When the mighty 1-1 emerged from his position as the final reserve, decapitating dozens with each swing of the massive log he hefted, the phalanx broke. Attempting to disengage, furiously shouting commands, suddenly Roland Crakehall felt his horse give way. Javelin slamming into its side, neighing pained bleats as Crakehall pushed himself up off the ground. Realizing with a wince that the proud horse was dying, a swift slice of his blade gave the beast some mercy. "Father," Lyle rode up, finding the Lord of Crakehall gathering around 100 dismounted knights for a final stand. "I've rallied the remaining horses. We can charge them." Roland shook his head, looking upon his large, strapping son, a noble warrior to continue his line. "Don't be a fucking fool, my son. They outnumber us, and you know it." Horns blaring in the distance, he knew that they were readying a charge of their own. "Get out of here, Lyle." "Get on my horse, then." Lyle was not about to let his father die on the field of battle. "I won't let you die here. Gods forbid that I retreat one step. I will either win the battle as a lord of the Westerlands, or die as one." He reached up, patting Lyle on the leg and handing him his sword. The mighty blade tusk proclaimed to be 1/10 Valyrian steel. "Take this, and get out of here. Save our house." Tears in his eyes, a rarity on the great strong boar of Crakehall. Sir Lyle handed his father his own blade and rode off, yelling at the other remaining mounted knights to join him, fleeing south down the King's Road. Looking upon his remaining men, Lord Roland Crakehall held his sword aloft. Banners proud as the oncoming horde of Tully and Selmy horsemen bared down upon them in a single shimmering wave. None so fierce. To the north the phalanx had collapsed. Several battalions of houses Westerling and Lefford fought like wildcats, engaging the delaying action so that the savaged main body could retreat in good order. In practice, it was more a rout in some semblance of order. Many ditched their steel plate and their shields, giving them far more speed in squelching through the mud and the muck towards the safety of the King's Road. Battered, bloodied, and exhausted, the Northerners and Stormlanders did not give chase. In spite of their king's frustrated commands, the fresh Tully reinforcements were too tired and small in number to do anything but collapse on whatever dry ground there was. Still by his banners, Jon refused to open up his men to a potential Frey envelopment. Instead, continued volleys from their archers kept them fleeing, while the lords reformed their men and guided them towards the final intact enemy unit on the far hills. 7 fucking hells, breathed Bronn. He had seen battle before, and was even quite cynical before that, but the marching Lannister host had looked close to invincible. Pessimist that he was, even he couldn't comprehend how they lost. Brynden the Blackfish, you lucky fucking cunt. House Tully had gotten its revenge. All right. Get back in the fight, you cowards, Jaime yelled, more out of desperation than actual malice. He made to grab a trooper, armor half stripped and shield nowhere to be found, only thing in his hand being a spear and a sword on his belt. The boy looked at his liege lord with wide, fearful eyes, but kept running. Someone form up and counterattack. Bronn slapped Jaime on the cheek. We fucking lost, Lannister. There's still time. Send a raven to Walder Frey. Walder fucking Frey won't save us. Our only hope is to get out and hope to the fucking gods that Jon Snow hates Frey more than us. Image of Cersei and Tommen's heads on a spike forefront. Jaime, nevertheless, was forced to agree with the former sellsword's assessment. Sound full retreat, he told his herald. We regrouped near the Ruby Ford. Several trumpeters began to give the orders. Dispatch riders racing to wherever the commanding lords were as the entire Lannister command tent was set to the torch. Clad in a perfectly polished plate and mail armor, Lord Jason Mallister of Seaguard cut a completely different pose from Jon. The latter's simple northern leathers drenched in mud and blood, much of it not his own. A fact worthy of bragging about, had Jon been inclined to do so. Behind Jon, the northern host of mostly Umbers and Manderleys halted, grizzled veterans of the war, with the Riverlands face to face with the fresh bannermen of their former allies, pledged to fight for the Lannister king. Finding the Warden of the North on foot, Mallister took his squire's hand and dismounted his steed, allowing his boots to squelch in the mud when not necessary. A legitimate act of humility, Jon acknowledged. Brienne beside him, Jon stepped beyond his men to approach the Riverlord. One highborn to another, Eagle met Direwolf. Silence stretching between them. But to Jon's surprise, Mallister bowed slightly. My Lord Stark, House Mallister, offers you congratulations in defeating the Lion. Jon blinked, sensing the sincerity in the Riverlord's tone. A quick glance was spared to Brienne for confirmation. Daughter of the Lord of Tarth, she nodded imperceptibly, knowing what Jon sought of her. Giving a bow of his own, Jon wiped a smear of blood from his forehead. Would have been harder had your men joined the battle. A wry grin formed on Mallister's face. I suppose so, he motioned to his bannerman. Lord Stark, we here all fought for your brother. Our swords tasted lion blood in the past, and I seek an audience with King Stannis so that we may taste it again. Essentially equals, Mallister nevertheless confessed to his lower position by extending his arm, offering it to Jon to take. Unable to stop the grin himself, Jon reached out to take the proffered hand. Behind and in front, cheers rang out from the two armies, heralding the end to the battle in favor of the Stag and Direwolf.